And I'll say some more good stuff about somebody for once coming up. The next match was for the TNT title. Darby Allin was staying in his corner against Buddy Matthews with Julia Hart. So Julia was there to offset Sting, I guess, from the House of Black. And by the way, Julia looks incredible. We'll say that again right at the start. And let me give the caveat here. This match is visually ridiculous to begin with, because of the size difference and the physique difference. Darby Allin is good enough. If they worked it smart, you'd believe it. This is what I was jotting down to myself at the start of the match. If they worked it smart, you'd believe it, but they won't, because Darby has no restraint or common sense. And that's pretty much the prophecy came true. And I'm not going to critique the match. At this point, everything Darby does, it's overdone, it's overbooked, it's ridiculous that he can withstand all of this. And he's going to just demolish his body. You could do this in a much more controlled way and get the same point across, and he could be a valued part of the roster for years. But nevertheless, having said that, Buddy is great. This is the first time I've been able to sit and look at him with anybody that remotely resembling a goddamn decent opponent, and without the other members of the group in the way. He's got physique. He's got strength. He can move like a cat. He was really, you could tell he was out there trying to get over because he had a chance to actually do something for once. His shit looked good. Here's the problem. The House of Black, as we've talked about, there's not even debate on this now, is a stinky, rotten fucking gimmick and has been since the start. And Malachi Black, everything he's done has stunk, because it's all a mind game, spooky bullshit instead of just being mean fucking wrestlers. As a name, Buddy Matthews might as well be Nobody Jones. I don't know why that, especially for a guy in a spooky group. I know he couldn't use his previous name, which I believe was Buddy Murphy. But goddamn, this is the...
Things will be better once I'm rid of the Murphy part of it.
Yeah, let me get rid of Murphy. That was the choice he made. Nobody is developing talent before putting them on television anymore, except the WWE, and they don't develop them. They fucking sanitize them, homogenize them, and pasteurize them. But as far as just what would be done, Gary Hart used to talk about developing talent, tweaking a gimmick or giving a guy a gimmick or, bringing something out of him here and there. Nobody's doing it now. They go to the indies and the guys come up with their own shit, and then Tony or whatever other Mark is in charge of whatever other company signs the indie darling and puts them on TV exactly like they are. Buddy Matthews is a guy that if you took the human being standing there with that physique and that ability to work and do moves and the athleticism and the strength and etc., and you gave him a name and a decent looking but not far out but cool gimmick, and keep Julia Hart in his fucking corner, then you'd have something and people'd be interested. But instead, it's a goofy name and a goofy group and being booked here, there, hither, and yon with no fucking focus, and nobody's developing the guy. Because, as we've seen, most of these young guys, young green talent, need to be saved from their worst instincts about what their names and gimmicks ought to be. So, anyway, before putting them out there and beating them into black and then deciding, hey, they're good, I'll start using them. Well, you've already beat them into black. Figure this shit out beforehand and have a fucking strategy. I don't remember that I ever changed anybody's name that I had debuted in any company that I was responsible for, except in OVW when it would be decreed from high above, and I would argue and couldn't get out of it. Because once you ever, unless, I'm not talking about the name change like, the guy fucking renounces his country and joins the, foreigners and becomes Crusher Khrushchev, or I'm talking about just changing a guy's name and or gimmick after you've already presented him on your television. That just makes you look like a blithering fucking idiot. If I had a plan for somebody, or if I didn't have a plan for somebody that I even remotely thought I wanted to use, I wouldn't put them on TV until I did. Nevertheless, here we go. The match, the break spot was for no reason. The lights go out. Malachi Black and Brody King appear in the entryway, get in a fight with Sting, and they fight off. And that goes, so we leave going to the break with a major fucking riot on the floor and the match continuing in the ring, and we come back on the other side of the break, and there's two guys in the ring, and the match still going on, and we never heard or saw from the other guys ever again. But the finish was Darby survived everything and won. Does that about sum it up, Brian?
Yes.
Everything that could possibly be done to a human body, with the exception of one thing that I saw in a German video one time that I won't go into details on, was done to Darby Allin, and then he won. And then Tony Schiavone gets in the ring and does Darby's promo for him. Well, I know you just had that big match over in Japan with you and Sting and Muda against Zabadaba D, and I know that also you're thinking this, and you're doing that, and you're going to be doing this soon. Well, what do you think, Darby? And as he gives him the microphone, boom, Samoa Joe's fucking video pops up on screen, and Joe does a fantastic heel promo on Darby Allin. He sounds like a badass. He looks like a badass. He's got the verbiage. He has bass in his voice. Sounds like a man. Again, this is the thing that you do when you bring a guy in. How long's Joe been there now? 4 months, 5 months, maybe 6 months. I don't know. Every week, the first 6 weeks, he should either speak in a manner like this or beat the shit out of somebody and pin them. But instead, they come in, they do some jobs, then somebody gets an idea, and then they start doing these brilliant promos when the fans have already decided they know how to take that person based on first impression. But anyway, Joe did great. And as he finished basically saying he was going to just kick the shit out of Darby Allin at will, they cut back to Darby in the ring, and he's got his arm around the referee who's still holding him up to his feet, and he's staring slack-jawed and says nothing, and they play his music, and we were gone. So that's the first time I've ever seen a guy being interviewed where he never spoke a word. The only people that spoke were the interviewer and the guy that was responding to the fucking guy who was being interviewed, without the guy being interviewed ever actually opening his mouth. But maybe it was better that way. What'd you think, Brian?
Good match. Thought it was a good match. And, with Buddy, his name is Matthews now. Beyond the whole name thing, and the name's terrible, I think the last thing we saw him do in WWE, and maybe I'm wrong, he was kind of a lackey for Seth Rollins. And then he fell in love with
Buddy.
Yeah, and he fell in love with Mysterio's daughter, I think. Or she fell in love with him. There was love in the air. I don't know where it was landing. And then he comes here, and he's immediately slotted in with the House of Black, where he'll clearly never be the number one guy. You could argue over who the number two guy is, the big giant guy or the big muscular guy, who's not as big as the giant. He's always a sidekick. He's always a side piece. He's never in focus. Just like I said about Action Andretti earlier, it would do him well to not just be saddled in a tag team. If you had Buddy, if he had a different name, a different gimmick, whatever it was, but if you had him, even if it was in this form, even if it was with Julia as a manager.
Yeah.
And he wasn't just tied with other people, not just the House of Black, which is terrible, but just anyone. Just let him be on his own and work and get over. I think that would help. And, we used to talk a lot about it. We haven't in a long time, the idea that in AEW almost everyone has to be in a faction. It may not be as bad as it was. I hadn't really thought about it in a while. Maybe if I did, I'd realize everyone.
It would be.
Yeah.
They're still there. They're just not putting the factions on TV as much because nobody gives a shit.
But unfortunately, that's what happens. Instead of, I think, to a lot of fans, Darby beating a really good wrestler in a really good match, it becomes Darby beat the third guy in the House of Black. And it doesn't help someone like Buddy
Yeah.
Matthews at all.